I've talked in more than a few previous vids and blogs about ethical, responsible, sustainable investments. And although I wouldn't call us specialists, it's certainly a field in which we've always been far more active than many other advisors. I don't think things have improved that much in that apparently and allegedly only 15% or less of the advisor community actively recommend ethical investments, if I can use that as a generic term, and many others will still pay lip service and in many cases actively dissuade clients from going into this responsible direction on the basis that it increases risk by supposedly limiting the areas in which fund managers can invest. Others will say, how ethical are any of these ethical funds? It's almost impossible to be 100% squeaky clean, so you may as well be dirty, to continue the analogy. I'm revisiting the subject for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we had a very interesting meeting with one of the leading positive impact fund managers today, Damien Lardoux of EQ Investors, who's always great to talk to. And because, very interestingly, again, in the recent downturn in markets, and I'm not going to mention the T word again, but those led and caused by the great man in the White House and his tweeting fingers, in those downturns, many of the responsible, sustainable, ethical portfolios we recommend have actually done better, outperformed the conventional meat-eating fund choices, which have the whole universe of investments from which they can choose. Just a reminder that there are and will continue to be varying degrees of ethicalness, and we rate them from light green to dark green, or pescatarian through to vegetarian to vegan, and the latter are usually called in the business positive impact funds. Now, these not only exclude what you might call the regular nasties, tobacco, oil, fossil fuels, armaments, but also choose to invest in those companies and sectors which will make a positive impact on the world. The lighter green funds are again in the business generically known as ESG, environmental social governance funds, and these focus on, once they've excluded the nasties, they focus on company governance, how companies are run. So they might, for instance, invest in a mining company, which the positive impact fund would avoid if the company turns off the office lights at night and doesn't use slave labour. Now, more details on this are available in previous YouTube episodes. So why have the green funds done better recently? Well, a couple of reasons, and they echo the reasons for their outperformance 5 years ago and underperformance 3 years ago, during COVID in the first instance and following the invasion of Ukraine in the second. Firstly, they generally exclude oil company shares, and those of many related industries and companies have been affected very recently by the big fall in the oil price and the current and perhaps continuing fall, as that seems to be what he wants, in the value of the dollar, because oil companies are paid in dollars when they sell all those barrels of oil. Secondly, the impact of what has become known as the Magnificent Seven, the big tech companies. The increase in their share price is what drove most of the boom pre-Trump last year, when there was so much speculation about how AI would rule the world, which since then is a bubble that China's burst to some extent by saying, well, they could do exactly the same thing probably for a fraction of the price. And the big tech companies' share prices have fallen accordingly. Now, many of the ethical portfolios haven't invested or have disinvested with those tech companies for ethical reasons. Musk, for instance, worries about the influence of social media, working conditions at Amazon and so on. Now, another area that often comes up when we're talking about these sort of funds is renewable energy. And many companies in this area were helped by subsidies, by Biden, and these have now gone as various governments' green agendas have been watered down. But it is still the future. We need and will need wind and solar power, and the positive impact funds continue to choose this sector. But interestingly, rather than buying their shares, which have fallen in value, are buying bonds or loans to the companies, which they're now issuing to raise money to continue their development. And if you have a balanced portfolio, which usually has 40% or more in these alternatives to shares, then green bonds, as they're called, are going to be part of that. They are not without risk, of course, because the company can still go bust. But if it does, bonds are the first thing to be repaid after the taxman's had his cut, but well before shareholders. My summary is that with or without Trump, these type of investments are the future. Sometimes that won't be evident in that they will not outperform, but will be outperformed by conventional, full meat-eating, all-inclusive portfolios. At other times, they won't. And very recently, it has been, if you invest in the most ethical of ethical funds, you've done better. If you're in there, hopefully you're in there for the right reasons, and whatever happens would stay the course through ups and downs, because you know your money, if they're well managed, as those we recommend are, you know your money's doing good things. If you're lighter green, you may well at sometimes question your decision, but once again, as always, hang on for the longer term and you'll do okay. If we've done our job, you'll be able to hang on for the long term because we'll have made sure that you've got enough in the bank, or maybe premium bonds, so you don't have to dip in when things aren't as good as they should be. Remember, it'll be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end yet.